Danny Martinez checked his watch for the fifth time in 2 minutes. The small hands showed 2:47 p.m., and his flight to Seattle was supposed to leave at 3:15 p.m. He was cutting it way too close. His heart was beating fast as he half walked, half ran, through Denver International Airport with his black carry-on bag bouncing behind him. The airport was busy that Tuesday afternoon. People were everywhere. Some sat in chairs looking at their phones. Others stood in long lines at coffee shops. Children ran around while their parents called after them. Danny tried to move quickly through all the noise and movement, but it was hard. He had been stuck in Chicago for 3 hours because of a storm. His original flight was supposed to get him to Denver with plenty of time to catch his connecting flight, but nothing had gone right today. First the storm, then a delay on the runway, and now he was running late for the most important interview of his life. Danny pulled out his phone and looked at the email again. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., he would sit across from the hiring manager at Tech Forward Solutions in Seattle. It was a marketing job that paid well and had room to grow. After being out of work for 4 months, this interview felt like his last chance to get back on his feet. He had practiced his answers over and over. He knew exactly what he would say when they asked about his experience. He had researched the company for weeks. His best suit was hanging in the hotel room he had booked near their office. Everything was planned perfectly except for this delay. Gate B12 was still far away. Danny looked at the signs hanging from the ceiling and tried to figure out the fastest route. His legs were getting tired, but he kept moving. He could not miss this flight. There was another flight to Seattle later that evening, but it would get him there too late for a good night's sleep before his interview. As he hurried past the information desk, something made him slow down. An old woman was sitting in one of the plastic chairs nearby. She looked upset and confused. Her gray hair was neat, and she wore a nice blue dress with matching shoes. A small brown suitcase sat next to her feet. In her hands, she held a piece of paper that looked wrinkled, like she had been holding it for a long time. Danny tried to keep walking. His gate was still 10 minutes away, and they were probably already boarding his flight. But something about the woman made him look back. She was looking around the busy airport like she was lost. Her eyes looked worried, and she kept checking the paper in her hands. The woman's name tag said Helen Baker. She looked like she was in her 70s, maybe older. Danny could see that she was well-dressed and probably used to taking care of herself, but right now she looked like she needed help. Danny stopped walking. He looked at his watch again. 2:51 p.m. If he helped this woman, he might miss his flight. If he missed his flight, he might miss his interview. If he missed his interview, he might not get the job. It was that simple, but he could not just walk away. Danny walked over to the woman and set his bag down next to her chair. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said in a gentle voice. "Are you okay? You look like you might need some help." Helen looked up at him with surprised eyes. "Oh, thank you for asking, young man. I'm having such a hard time today." Her voice shook a little. "My flight to Portland was canceled, and I do not know what to do. The people at the counter were so busy, and I could not understand what they were telling me about getting another flight." Danny felt his stomach drop. Portland was in the opposite direction from Seattle. If he helped her, he would definitely miss his flight. He looked toward gate B12, then back at Helen's worried face. "What time do you need to be in Portland?" Danny asked, even though he knew he was probably making a big mistake. "My granddaughter is getting married on Saturday," Helen said. "I have been looking forward to it for months. She is my only granddaughter, and I promised I would be there, but now I do not know if I can make it." Her eyes started to fill with tears. Danny looked at his watch one more time. 2:54 p.m. He could still make it to his gate if he ran. The boarding process usually took at least 15 minutes. There was still a chance, but looking at Helen's face, he knew he could not leave her sitting there alone and confused. "Let me see what I can do to help," Danny said, sitting down in the chair next to her. "What airline were you flying with?" "Skyward Airlines," Helen said, showing him her ticket. "The lady at the counter gave me this paper, but I do not understand what it means." She handed him a rebooking confirmation that was printed in small letters with lots of numbers and codes. Danny looked at the paper and then at his watch. 2:56 p.m. Through the big windows he could see planes taking off and landing. One of them might be his flight to Seattle, getting ready to leave without him. He took out his phone and opened the Skyward Airlines app. "Okay, Helen, let me see what flights are available to Portland today," he said, trying to sound calm even though his heart was pounding. As he started searching for flights, Danny heard an announcement over the airport speakers. "Final boarding call for Flight 447 to Seattle, now boarding at Gate B12. That was his flight. In a few minutes the door would close, and the plane would leave without him. His interview, his chance at the job, his plan to get his life back, on track, it was all slipping away. But Helen was looking at him with such hope in her eyes. She was counting on him now. She had been sitting in this busy, confusing airport for hours with no one to help her. Her granddaughter's wedding was important to her, maybe the most important thing in her world right now. Danny made his choice. He put his phone on the small table between their chairs and focused completely on helping Helen find a new flight to Portland. Behind him, he could hear the gate agent making another announcement, but he did not turn around to listen. Danny looked at his phone screen and started typing in the search box. "Portland, Oregon," he said out loud as he worked. "What date do you need to fly, Helen?" "Today, if possible," Helen said, wrapping her hands around her purse. "The wedding is on Saturday, but I wanted to get there early to help with the preparations. My granddaughter Jenny is so excited, and I promised her grandmother would be there to help her get ready." Danny nodded and kept searching. Behind him, he could hear the final boarding announcement for his Seattle flight. The gate agent's voice was getting more urgent. "Last call for passengers on Flight 447 to Seattle. The aircraft door will be closing in 2 minutes. His hands shook a little as he scrolled through the flight options. There were 3 flights to Portland that evening. One left at 6:30 p.m., another at 8:15 p.m., and the last one at 10:45 p.m. All of them had seats available, but they were expensive because it was such short notice. "The good news is there are flights available," Danny told Helen. "The bad news is they cost more than your original ticket probably did." Helen's face fell. "How much more?" Danny did the math in his head. Her original ticket was probably around $200. The new flights were showing prices between $400 and $600. "It looks like the cheapest option is $425 for the 6:30 flight." "Oh my," Helen said quietly. "That is a lot of money. I am on a fixed income since my husband died 2 years ago. I saved up for months just to buy the original ticket." Danny felt terrible for her. He looked back toward his gate and saw that the area was now empty. The gate agent was closing the door. Through the big window, he could see his plane starting to move away from the terminal. His flight to Seattle was gone. "Let me try something else," Danny said, trying not to think about what he had just lost. He opened a new browser on his phone and went to different travel websites. Sometimes they had better deals than the airline's own website. While he searched, Helen told him more about her granddaughter. Jenny is 26 years old and works as a teacher in Portland. She met her fiancé at the school where they both work. He teaches math and she teaches 3rd grade. They are such a sweet couple. Danny found a slightly cheaper option on a travel website. The 8:15 p.m. flight was available for $375. It was still expensive, but better than the other prices. "I found something a little cheaper," he told Helen. $375 for a flight that leaves at 8:15 tonight. You would get to Portland around 10 p.m. Helen calculated in her head. "I suppose I could manage that if I have to. I have some money saved for emergencies, and I guess this counts as an emergency." "Wait," Danny said. "Before you spend your emergency money, let me talk to someone at the airline counter. Sometimes they can help with situations like this, especially since your original flight was canceled because of weather." Danny stood up and looked around. The Skyward Airlines counter was about 50 feet away, but there was a long line of people waiting. Other passengers were also dealing with canceled and delayed flights because of the storms that had hit the Midwest earlier that day. "This might take a while," Danny told Helen. "Are you comfortable waiting here, or do you want to come with me?" "I will come with you," Helen said, standing up slowly. My legs are a bit stiff from sitting so long, but I think the walk will do me good. They walked over to the airline counter together. Danny carried Helen's small suitcase for her, and she held onto his arm for support. The line was moving very slowly. Each person at the counter seemed to have a complicated problem that took a long time to solve. While they waited, Danny's phone rang. The caller ID showed Tech Forward Solutions. His heart jumped. It was the company in Seattle. I should probably take this, Danny told Helen. Hello, this is Danny Martinez, he answered. Hi, Danny. This is Lisa Chen from Tech Forward Solutions. I was calling to confirm your interview tomorrow morning at 9. We are really looking forward to meeting you. Danny's stomach felt sick. Actually, Lisa, I have a problem. My flight was delayed and I missed my connection to Seattle. I am not going to be able to make it there tonight. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh no, that is really unfortunate. We have a pretty tight schedule this week. Let me check with my manager and see if we can reschedule. Danny waited while Lisa put him on hold. The music that played was cheerful and upbeat, which made him feel even worse about his situation. Helen looked at him with concern. Is everything okay, dear? It is the company I was supposed to interview with tomorrow, Danny explained. I'm trying to see if they can reschedule. Lisa came back on the line. Danny, I talked to my manager, and unfortunately, we need to fill this position quickly. We have 2 other candidates interviewing tomorrow, and we were planning to make a decision by the end of the week. I am really sorry, but we are going to have to move forward without you. Danny felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. I understand, he managed to say. Thanks for calling to let me know. Again, I am really sorry about this. Good luck with your job search. The line went dead. Danny put his phone back in his pocket and tried not to show how upset he was, but Helen had been watching his face and she could tell something bad had happened. They could not reschedule? She asked gently. No, Danny said. They gave the interview slot to someone else. The job is gone. Helen put her hand on his arm. Oh, honey, I am so sorry. This is all my fault. If I had not asked for your help, you would be on your way to Seattle right now. Danny looked at her, worried face, and tried to smile. It is not your fault, Helen. You did not ask me to help you. I chose to help you, and I would make the same choice again. They moved forward in the line. There were still 8 people ahead of them. Danny tried not to think about the job he had just lost, or the money he had spent on the hotel room in Seattle that he would not be using. Instead, he focused on helping Helen get to her granddaughter's wedding. When they finally reached the counter, the airline agent looked tired and stressed. She had probably been dealing with upset passengers all day. How can I help you? She asked without much enthusiasm. Danny explained Helen's situation. The agent listened and typed information into her computer. After a few minutes, she looked up with better news than Danny had expected. Since your original flight was canceled, due to weather, we can rebook you on another flight today at no extra charge, she told Helen. The next available flight to Portland leaves at 7:20 p.m. from gate C-15. You will arrive at 9:35 p.m. Helen's face lit up with relief and joy. Really? No extra charge? That is correct. Weather cancellations are not your fault, so we do not charge passengers to rebook. The agent printed new boarding passes and baggage tags. You have about 3 hours before your flight, so you have plenty of time. Helen turned to Danny with tears in her eyes. I cannot thank you enough. If you had not helped me, I would still be sitting over there confused and scared. You missed your important interview to help me. Danny felt good seeing Helen's happiness, even though his own situation was terrible. At least something good had come out of this difficult day. After getting Helen's new boarding pass, Danny walked with her to find gate C-15. It was on the other side of the airport, so they had to take the underground train that connected the different terminals. Helen held onto the rail tightly as the train moved, and Danny made sure she did not lose her balance. I have never liked these moving trains, Helen said with a small laugh. When I was young, airports were much simpler. You walked straight, from the entrance to your gate. Now everything is so big and complicated. Danny smiled. I know what you mean. Sometimes I get lost in airports too, and I travel a lot for work. Well, I used to travel a lot when I had work. They found 2 seats together near gate C15. Helen's flight was not for another 2.5 hours, but she seemed happy to have found the right place. She opened her purse and pulled out a small bag of peppermints. "Would you like one?" she offered. "My husband always carried these. He said they helped him think clearly during business meetings. I keep them now because they remind me of him." Danny took a mint and thanked her. "How long were you married?" 47 years. Helen said, her eyes getting soft with memory. "We met when we were both 22. He was working at a small company, and I was a secretary at the bank downtown. We used to eat lunch in the same park every day, and one day he asked if he could share my bench." "That sounds like a nice way to meet someone," Danny said. "It was simpler back then," Helen continued. "People took time to talk to each other. Now everyone is always looking at their phones or rushing somewhere." She paused and looked at Danny. "Except for you. You stopped to help a stranger when you had somewhere important to be." Danny felt uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same thing. Helen shook her head. "No, dear, they would not have. I sat in that chair for over 2 hours, and dozens of people walked past me. Some of them saw that I was upset, but they all kept walking. You were the only one who stopped." They sat quietly for a moment, watching other passengers hurry by with their luggage. Danny thought about what Helen had said. Maybe she was right. Maybe most people would not have stopped to help. "Tell me about yourself," Helen said. "What kind of work do you do?" Danny explained about his background in marketing and customer service. He had worked for 3 different companies over the past 8 years, helping them connect better with their customers. His last job had been with a medium-sized company that made software for restaurants. "I really enjoyed that work," Danny said. "I liked figuring out what customers needed and then finding ways to give it to them. But the company had money problems and had to let a lot of people go. I was one of them." "How long have you been looking for a new job?" Helen asked. 4 months, Danny said. "It is harder than I thought it would be. There are a lot of people looking for work right now. That interview today was the first real opportunity I have had in weeks." Helen listened carefully as Danny talked. She asked good questions about his experience and seemed genuinely interested in his career. She wanted to know about specific projects he had worked on and what he had learned from each job. "Customer service is so important," Helen said. "When a company treats people well, those people remember it. They tell their friends and family. But when a company treats people badly, they remember that too, and they tell even more people." "Exactly," Danny said, getting excited about the topic. "That is what I tried to explain to my old boss. Every interaction with a customer is a chance to build loyalty or lose it. It does not matter if it is a big purchase or a small question. People remember how they were treated." Helen nodded. "You understand something that many business people never learn. Making money is important, but taking care of people is what makes a business successful in the long run." They talked about different companies they had dealt with over the years. Helen had some funny stories about poor customer service she had experienced, and Danny shared some of his ideas for how companies could do better. "I once had a problem with my credit card when I was traveling," Helen said. "I called the company and they made me wait on hold for 45 minutes. When someone finally answered, they were rude and acted like I was bothering them. I had been a customer for 15 years, but I canceled that card the next day." "That is exactly what I mean," Danny said. "They probably spent hundreds of dollars trying to get you as a customer originally, and then they lost you over one bad phone call." Danny's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his friend Kevin in Seattle, asking how the interview had gone. Danny realized he would have to explain to several people that he had missed the interview. Some of them would think he was crazy for choosing to help a stranger, instead of going to his important meeting. But sitting here talking with Helen, Danny did not feel crazy. He felt like he had done the right thing. Helen was a kind, interesting person who had been scared and confused. She needed help, and he had been able to give it to her. That seemed more important than any job interview. "You look sad again," Helen said, noticing his expression. "Are you thinking about the job you missed?" "A little," Danny admitted. "I am also thinking about how I am going to pay my rent next month. I had some money saved up, but it is running." Out pretty fast. Helen was quiet for a moment, then she said, "You know, I worked in business for many years before I retired. I learned that the best employees are not always the ones with the fanciest degrees or the most experience. The best employees are the ones who care about doing the right thing, even when it costs them something." "What kind of business were you in?" Danny asked. Helen smiled mysteriously. "Oh, I worked in several different areas over the years. Transportation, mostly. Helping people get from one place to another safely and comfortably." Danny was curious about her answer, but before he could ask more questions, Helen changed the subject. She asked about his family and where he had grown up. They talked about their favorite movies and books. Helen was surprisingly knowledgeable about modern technology and current events. As they talked, Danny realized that Helen was one of the most interesting people he had met in a long time. She was wise and funny, and she seemed to genuinely care about his problems. He found himself telling her things he had not shared with anyone else, including his fears about his future and his doubts about his career choices. "You are going to be fine," Helen told him. "I can tell that you are a good person with a strong work ethic. Sometimes when one door closes, it is because a better door is about to open." Danny hoped she was right, but he was not sure what other doors might be available to him. He had applied for dozens of jobs and had gotten very few responses. The Seattle interview had been his best chance in months. An announcement came over the speakers. "Flight 892 to Portland will begin boarding in 30 minutes at Gate C-15. Helen gathered her things and stood up slowly. "That is my flight," she said. "I cannot thank you enough for everything you have done today. You are a special young man, Danny Martinez." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small white business card. "I want you to have this," she said, holding it out to him. Danny took the business card from Helen's hand and looked down at it. At first his eyes just saw the clean white paper and elegant black letters. Then the words started to make sense, and his mouth fell open in complete shock. The card read, "Helen Baker, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Skyward Airlines." Danny blinked and read it again. Skyward Airlines. The same airline that had canceled Helen's original flight. The same airline whose counter they had just visited. The same airline that was about to fly Helen to Portland. "This cannot be real," Danny said quietly, staring at the card. "You own Skyward Airlines?" Helen smiled at his shocked expression. "I do not just own it, dear. I built it from nothing over 30 years ago. My husband and I started with one small plane that flew between Denver and 3 other cities. Now we have over 200 planes and fly to 48 states. Danny's mind was spinning. He tried to remember everything he had said about airlines and customer service during their conversation. Had he complained about anything? Had he said something wrong? "But you were sitting there looking so confused and helpless," Danny said. "You did not know how to use the app or understand the rebooking process." "That was completely real," Helen said. "I may own the airline, but I do not usually handle the day-to-day customer service issues. When my flight was canceled today, I was just another passenger trying to figure out what to do next. And I discovered that our systems are much more confusing than I realized." Helen sat back down in her chair, even though her flight would be boarding soon. "Danny, I need to tell you something. I was not just traveling to my granddaughter's wedding. Today, I was also doing something I do several times a year. I travel on our planes and through our airports without telling anyone who I am. I watch how our employees treat customers. I see what problems people have. I try to understand what it feels like to be a regular passenger." Danny was still staring at the business card. "So you were testing your own airline?" "In a way, yes, but I was not testing you. I really did need help, and I was genuinely confused and upset. What happened between us was completely real." Helen's voice became more serious. "Danny, in 30 years of running this company, I have never seen anything like what you did today." "What do you mean?" Danny asked. Helen leaned forward in her chair. "You gave up something very important to help a complete stranger. You missed your job interview, which you told me was your best opportunity in months. You spent over an hour of your time helping me solve my problem. You walked me across the airport, carried my bag, and stayed with me until you knew I was okay." Danny felt embarrassed by her praise. It was not that big of a deal. Yes, it was, Helen said firmly. Do you know what most people did when they saw me sitting there looking upset? They looked away quickly and walked faster so they would not have to deal with me. Some of them probably felt bad about it, but they still kept walking. Helen pointed toward the busy gate area around them. Look at all these people rushing around. Everyone is worried about their own problems, their own schedules, their own needs. Very few people stop to help someone else, especially when it might cost them something important. Danny thought about the choice he had made. At the time, it had not felt like such a big decision. He had just seen someone who needed help, and he could not walk away. The thing is, Helen continued, what you did today shows me exactly the kind of person you are. You have the qualities that I have been looking for in someone to help me solve some big problems at Skyward Airlines. What kind of problems? Danny asked. Helen sighed. The same problems you experienced today. Our customer service is not good enough. Our systems are too complicated. Our employees are too busy and stressed to really help people. Passengers like me get lost and confused and nobody stops to help them. She pulled out her phone and showed Danny some numbers on the screen. Our customer satisfaction scores have been dropping for 2 years. People complain that we do not care about them. As individuals, they say we treat them like numbers instead of human beings. Danny looked at the data. The scores were not terrible, but they were definitely going in the wrong direction. I have been trying to figure out how to fix this problem, Helen said. I have hired consultants and read reports and attended conferences. But today, watching you help me, I realized what we really need. What is that? Danny asked. We need someone who understands that every passenger is a real person with real problems and real feelings. Someone who knows that good customer service is not about following scripts or meeting quotas. It is about caring enough to actually help people, even when it is inconvenient. Danny was starting to understand where this conversation was going, but he could not quite believe it. Helen continued. We need someone to redesign our customer service from the ground up. Someone to train our employees to think differently about their jobs. Someone to create systems that actually work for regular people, not just for airline experts. The gate. Agent announced that Helen's flight was ready to begin boarding. Passengers started lining up with their bags and boarding passes. Helen, are you offering me a job? Danny asked directly. Helen smiled. I am offering you the chance to solve the problems you care most about. You told me that you love helping companies connect better with their customers. You said that every interaction is a chance to build loyalty or lose it. Well, Skyward Airlines has thousands of interactions with customers every single day, and we are losing too many of them. Danny's heart was beating fast. This was not at all what he had expected when he woke up that morning. What would the job be exactly, he asked. I want to create a new position called Director of Customer Experience, Helen said. You would report directly to me. Your job would be to make sure that no passenger ever has to sit alone and confused in an airport the way I did today. You would have a budget, a team, and the authority to make real changes. The gate agent called for first-class passengers to board. Helen stood up and gathered her purse and carry-on bag. I know this is a lot to think about, she said. You do not have to give me an answer right now, but I want you to seriously consider it. The salary would be $85,000 a year to start, with bonuses based on how much we improve our customer satisfaction scores. Danny's current unemployment benefits were about $400 a week. The Seattle job would have paid $60,000 a year. $85,000 was more money than he had ever made in his life. There is one more thing, Helen said as she prepared to get in the boarding line. I do not want you to take this job just because of the money. I want you to take it because you believe in what we are trying to do. Because you want to help, make traveling better for millions of people. She handed Danny another business card, this one with her personal phone number written on the back. Call me tomorrow after you have had time to think about it, she said. If you are interested, we can set up a proper meeting next week to discuss all the details. Helen got in line with the other passengers. Just before she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, she turned back to Danny one more time. Thank you again for everything you did today, she called out. You changed my day completely. Now maybe we can change some other people's days too. Danny watched her disappear down the jet bridge. He looked down at the 2 business cards in his hand and tried to process everything that had just happened. An hour ago, he had been unemployed with no prospects. Now he was holding a job offer from the CEO of a major airline. He sat back down in his chair and pulled out his phone. He had a lot of thinking to do. 3 weeks later, Danny stood in front of a tall glass building in downtown Denver. The silver letters on the front of the building spelled Skyward Airlines corporate headquarters. He adjusted his tie and checked his reflection in the glass. Dorsa, today was his first day as Director of Customer Experience, and he wanted to make a good impression. The phone call to Helen the day after their airport meeting had been one of the most important conversations of Danny's life. He had spent that entire night thinking about her offer, walking around his small apartment and weighing the pros and cons. By morning, he knew what his answer would be. I want to take the job, he had told Helen when he called her. But I have one condition. What is that? Helen had asked. I want to spend my first week working as a regular customer service agent at the airport. I want to answer phones, help passengers at the counter, and deal with problems the way your frontline employees do every day. I cannot fix the system if I do not understand how it really works. Helen had laughed with delight. That is exactly the kind of thinking I was hoping for. Consider it done. Now, 3 weeks later, Danny had completed that week of training plus 2 more weeks of meetings, planning sessions, and getting to know the company. Today, he would start implementing his ideas. The elevator took him to the 15th floor, where his new office was located. It was not a huge office, but it had a big window with a view of the Rocky Mountains in the distance. On his desk was a nameplate that read, Danny Martinez, Director of Customer Experience. Next to it was a small potted plant and a note from Helen that said, Welcome to the team. Time to change some lives. Danny had barely sat down when there was a knock on his door. Helen walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the same warm smile he remembered from the airport. Good morning, she said, handing him one of the cups. Ready for your first official day? I think so, Danny said, though he felt a little nervous. The past 3 weeks had been like a whirlwind. He had gone from unemployed to having one of the most important jobs at a major airline. Sometimes he still could not believe it was real. I have been thinking about our conversation yesterday, Helen said, sitting down in the chair across from his desk. You mentioned wanting to start with the airport experience for elderly passengers and people who are not comfortable with technology. Danny nodded. During his week working at the airport counter, he had seen dozens of passengers who struggled with the same problems Helen had faced. Older people who did not understand the self-check-in machines. Families with small children who needed extra help. People whose flights were canceled and who had no idea what to do next. I have been working on a pilot program, Danny said, pulling out a folder full of notes and plans. I want to call it the Personal Assistant Program. We would have specially trained employees whose only job is to help passengers who are confused or need extra assistance. Helen leaned forward with interest. Tell me more. These employees would not be stuck behind a counter, Danny explained. They would walk around the airport looking for people who seem lost or upset. They would carry tablets so they could help passengers rebook flights, find gates, or solve problems right on the spot. They would wear bright-colored shirts so they are easy to spot. I love it, Helen said. How many people would we need for the pilot program? I think we should start with 6 people at Denver International Airport, Danny said. 3 for the morning shift and 3 for the afternoon and evening. We can test it for 3 months and see how it works. Helen made notes on her phone as Danny talked. What else? Danny opened his laptop and showed her a presentation he had been working on. I also want to redesign our customer service phone system. Right now, when people call, they have to press numbers for different options, then wait on hold, then explain their problem to someone who might not be able to help them. That sounds like the experience I had when I tried to call about my canceled flight, Helen said. I gave up after 20 minutes. Exactly. So I want to try something different. When people call, the first thing they hear would be a real person saying, Hi, this is Skyward Airlines. I am here to help you. What can I do for you today? No menu options, no waiting, just immediate human contact. Helen raised her eyebrows. That would be expensive. We would need a lot more customer service agents. Yes, it would cost more money up front, Danny agreed. But I think we would save money in the long run. When customers get good service quickly, they do not call back multiple times with the same problem. When they have a good experience, they choose to fly with us again instead of switching to a competitor. Danny clicked to the next slide of his presentation. I have been looking at the numbers from other companies that tried similar approaches. On average, they saw customer satisfaction go up by 30% and repeat business go up by 20% within the first year. Those are impressive numbers, Helen said. What would you need to make this happen? Danny had prepared for this question. For the airport program, we would need to hire and train 6 new employees. The cost would be about $300,000 per year. For the phone system changes, we would need to hire 12 more customer service agents and upgrade our technology. That would cost about $800,000 per year. Helen was quiet for a moment, thinking about the investment. Danny held his breath, wondering if she would think his ideas were too expensive. You know what? Helen said finally. Let us do both programs. If you are right about the results, the investment will pay for itself, and if you are wrong, we will learn something valuable and try a different approach. Danny felt a surge of excitement and gratitude. Really? You want to move forward with both ideas? I hired you because I trust your judgment, Helen said. You proved at the airport that you understand what good customer service looks like. Now I want to give you the resources to make it happen on a larger scale. Over the next hour, they discussed timelines, budgets, and implementation details. Danny would have 2 months to hire and train the new employees. The airport program would launch first, followed by the phone system changes 6 weeks later. As Helen prepared to leave his office, she paused at the door. Danny, I want you to know how grateful I am that you missed your flight that day. I have been running this company for 30 years, but I had forgotten what it felt like to be a customer who really needed help. I am grateful too, Danny said. That was the worst and best day I have had in a long time, Helen laughed. I have a feeling we are going to have a lot of good days ahead of us. After she left, Danny sat at his desk and looked out the window at the mountains. 6 months ago, he had been struggling to find any job at all. Now he was in charge of improving the travel experience for millions of passengers every year. It felt like an enormous responsibility, but also like the opportunity of a lifetime. He opened his computer and started working on a training manual for the new personal assistant program employees. He wanted them to understand that their job was not just about solving problems or answering questions. Their job was about treating every passenger like a real person who deserved respect and care. Danny thought about Helen sitting alone in the airport, confused and worried about missing her granddaughter's wedding. He thought about all the other people who had that same experience every day at airports around the country. If his programs worked, maybe fewer people would have to feel that way. He picked up his phone and called the Human Resources Department. Hi, this is Danny Martinez. I need to post some job openings for customer service positions, and I want to make sure the job descriptions mention that we are looking for people who genuinely care about helping others. As Danny hung up the phone, he realized that his life had changed completely because he had made one simple choice. When he saw someone who needed help, he had stopped to help them, even though it cost him something important. That choice had led him to exactly where he was supposed to be.